The rain was not just falling. It was hammering against the roof of the old sedan, sounding like 1,000 tiny fists demanding to be let in. Inside the car, Alina gripped the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles had turned a ghostly white. The windshield wipers were fighting a losing battle, smearing the water across the glass rather than clearing it, creating blurry, dancing monsters out of the streetlights ahead. Alina let out a shaky breath that fogged up the window slightly. She was tired. It was a deep, heavy kind of tired that didn't just go away after a good night's sleep. It was the kind of tired that settled into your bones after years of working double shifts, scraping pennies together and worrying about the future. She was on her way home from her second job of the day. She had spent the last 8 hours cleaning office buildings in the city center, scrubbing floors and emptying trash bins, while the rest of the world was asleep. Her feet throbbed inside her worn-out sneakers, and her back ached. But all she could think about was getting home, taking a hot shower, and maybe, if she was lucky, eating the leftover pasta from the night before. The highway was nearly empty. It was that time of night when the only people on the road were truckers, night shift workers, and people who had nowhere else to go. The rain made the black asphalt shine like oil, reflecting the red glow of her taillights. Alina squinted, trying to focus on the broken white lines that separated the lanes. She just wanted to be home. She just wanted to see her 2 children sleeping safely in their beds. Then it happened. It wasn't a loud explosion or a terrifying crash. It was a cough, a mechanical, wheezing cough from the engine block. Then the car lurched violently, and the check engine light flashed on, glowing with an angry orange brightness that seemed to mock her. "No, no, no," Alina whispered, her voice rising in panic. "Please, not tonight. Don't do this to me tonight." She tapped the gas pedal, but the engine didn't respond. The car began to lose speed, slowing down rapidly despite her foot being pressed to the floor. The headlights dimmed, turning the dark world in front of her into a murky, gray cave. She managed to steer the heavy vehicle toward the shoulder of the road, her heart pounding in her chest like a drum. The car rolled to a stop. Silence filled the air, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the rhythmic thwack hiss of the rain and the click-click-click of the cooling engine. Alina tried to turn the key in the ignition. She turned it once. Nothing. She turned it again. Just a clicking sound. Tears of frustration pricked at the corners of her eyes. She hit the steering wheel with the palm of her hand. "Why?" she yelled, though there was no one to hear her. "Why does everything have to be so hard?" She leaned back in the seat and closed her eyes for a moment, forcing herself to breathe. Panic wouldn't help. She needed to figure this out. She reached for her phone, her fingers fumbling slightly in the dim light. She pressed the power button. The screen lit up, casting a pale blue glow on her face, and then immediately displayed the dreaded message: no signal. Alina looked out the side window. All she could see was darkness and the occasional blur of a tree. She was miles away from the nearest town. She was stuck on the side of a highway in the pouring rain, in a dead car. With no way to call for help, she opened the glove compartment and dug through the messy pile of napkins, old receipts, and sunglasses. She found a small flashlight, but when she clicked it on, it flickered weakly and died. She tossed it onto the passenger seat in disgust. Then she opened her purse. She pulled out her wallet. Inside, behind a clear plastic window, was a credit card that was already maxed out and a few crumpled dollar bills. She counted them. $12. That was all the cash she had until payday, which was still 3 days away. A tow truck would cost at least $100 just to show up. Maybe more. Repairing the car would cost money she didn't have. If she lost this car, she couldn't get to work. If she couldn't get to work, she couldn't pay rent. The terrifying domino effect of poverty began to tumble through her mind, each piece falling faster than the last. She felt trapped, like a small animal caught in a snare. Suddenly, bright lights flooded the interior of her car. Alina jumped, shielding her eyes. Through the rain-spattered rearview mirror, she saw a pair of blinding headlights approaching. A vehicle was pulling over behind her. Her stomach did a nervous flip. Part of her was relieved help was here, but another part, the part that had learned to be cautious, was scared. It was late. It was dark. She was a woman alone. She watched the mirror intently. The vehicle that stopped was not a truck. It was long, low, and sleek. Even through the rain, she could tell it was expensive. It looked like the kind of car she only saw in magazines or on television shows about rich people. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. Alina watched him closely. He was wearing a suit, the kind that looked tailored and stiff. He didn't have a raincoat, so the rain was instantly soaking his jacket and flattening his hair. He looked rushed, agitated. He checked his watch, then looked at his phone, waving it in the air as if trying to find a signal. Alina rolled her window down just an inch, just enough to hear, "Hey." The man shouted over the sound of the rain, "Do you need help?" Alina hesitated. She didn't want to get out of her car into the cold rain, but she also knew she couldn't stay there forever. She cracked the door open slightly, keeping one hand on the handle, ready to slam it shut if she needed to. "My car died," she said, her voice trembling slightly from the cold and the fear. "I can't get it started." The man walked closer, squinting against the rain. "I have a roadside assistance service," he said, sounding impatient. "Let me call them for you. They can come get you." He pulled out a sleek, expensive-looking phone and tapped the screen. He frowned. He tapped it again, harder. He held the phone up high, then lowered it, turning in circles. "Damn it," he muttered, loud enough for her to hear. He looked at Alina, his face a mask of stress. "I have no signal out here. Do you have a signal?" Alina shook her head sadly. "No, I checked. Nothing." The man ran a hand through his wet hair, looking truly distressed now. He looked at his watch again, his eyes wide. "I am going to miss my flight," he said, more to himself than to her. "I have to be at the airport in 20 minutes. This deal. I can't miss this flight." He looked at Alina, then at her broken-down car, and then back at the empty highway. He was a man who was used to being in control, a man who was used to money solving every problem. But tonight, money wasn't buying him a signal, and it wasn't fixing his time crunch. He was just a man standing in the rain, stuck like everyone else. Alina looked at him. She saw the expensive watch on his wrist. She saw the smooth leather of his shoes that were now ruined in a puddle. He was a millionaire, probably. He had more money in his bank account than she would earn in 10 lifetimes. And yet, looking at him hunched over in the rain, he looked just as vulnerable as she felt. A strange thought crossed Elena's mind. Usually, when people saw someone broken down, they either ignored them or felt pity. But she didn't feel pity for him. She just saw another human being who was having a terrible night. She knew what it felt like to be desperate. She knew the heavy weight of anxiety pressing down on your chest. She reached down onto the floor of the passenger seat. Pushing aside empty water bottles and old fast food bags, her hand brushed against something cool and plastic. It was a small, clunky, portable charger. It was bright pink and had a cracked casing. She had bought it at a discount store a year ago. It wasn't fast, and it didn't hold much power, but it was better than nothing. She usually kept it for emergencies, specifically to make sure her kids could play their games on long trips if the car charger failed. Alina picked it up. She looked at the man. He was pacing back and forth now, talking frantically to himself about the importance of the meeting and the people waiting for him. He looked miserable. She took a deep breath. She was cold. She was tired. She had $12 to her name and a broken car. But she had this one small thing that could help. It wasn't much, but it was something. She opened the car door fully this time, ignoring the cold blast of wind that swept rain into the car. She stepped out into the night, her sneakers splashing into a muddy puddle. The man stopped pacing and looked at her, surprised by her sudden movement. "Excuse me," Alina said, her voice soft but clear over the rain. She held out the pink, cracked charger. "I have this. It's not much, but it has a little bit of power left. You can try it." The man stared at her. He looked at the cheap, plastic object in her hand, and then he looked at her face. He saw the kindness in her eyes, despite the worry lines etched around them. He didn't move for a second. He seemed confused. In his world, people usually wanted something in exchange. But this woman, this stranger in the rain, was just offering him a lifeline. "Are you serious?" he asked, his voice quiet for the first time. Alina nodded. "Take it. It looks like you really need to make that call." The man reached out and took the charger. His fingers brushed against hers, which were freezing cold. He didn't say thank you yet. He just plugged his phone into the charger with trembling hands and waited. For 10 seconds, they both stood there in the pouring rain, waiting to see if the little pink brick would save the night. Suddenly, the man's face lit up. Not from a smile, but from the light of his phone screen. "I have a signal," he whispered. "I have a signal." Quickly dialed a number. He turned his back slightly, speaking urgently. "Yes, it's me. I'm on the highway." "No, I'm not at the airport yet." "Car trouble. Listen, don't let them leave without me. I'm 10 minutes away. I promise. I have a ride." He hung up and turned back to Alina. The relief was palpable in his posture, but his eyes were full of guilt. He looked at her, really looked at her, standing there in the rain with a broken car. "You are amazing," he said. "Seriously. I can't thank you enough. My assistant is sending a car for me right now." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick leather wallet. He flipped it open and revealed a stack of large bills. "Please," he said, thrusting the money toward her. "Take this. For the charger. For your trouble, it's the least I can do. This will cover a tow truck and whatever else you need." Alina looked at the money. It was more than enough to fix her car. It was enough to buy groceries for a month. It was tempting, so incredibly tempting. Her hand twitched at her side, but then she looked at the man's face. He looked frantic, desperate to pay, as if that was the only way he knew how to balance the scales. And she remembered the feeling of just wanting to do something good without a price tag attached. She remembered how it felt when someone helped her just because they cared, not because they wanted something in return. She shook her head gently and pushed his hand away. "No," she said firmly. The man blinked, completely baffled. "No. What do you mean, no? Take it, please." "I don't want your money," Alina said, a small smile touching her lips. "I just wanted to help." "You looked like you were in a tight spot. We've all been there. But your car." The man stammered. "You're stuck here in the rain. I'll figure it out," she said, shrugging her shoulders as if it was no big deal, even though her heart was still racing. "I have a spare tire in the back. I'll sit on that and keep dry. The police usually come by eventually. Just go. Don't miss your flight." "I can't just leave you here," he insisted, still holding the money out. "Can, and you should," Alina said softly. "Make your deal. Save your company. Just promise me one thing." "Anything," the man said. "Just pay it forward," Alina said. "One day, when you see someone who needs help, help them. That's the only payment I need." The man stared at her, utterly speechless. He slowly lowered his hand and put the wallet back in his pocket. The rain was still pouring, the thunder still rumbling in the distance. For a moment, the chaos of the world seemed to stop. He looked at this poor woman in her worn-out clothes, standing by a broken car, who had just taught him a lesson about generosity that none of his wealthy friends ever could. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I won't forget this. I promise." "You're welcome," Alina said. "Go. Drive safe." The man hesitated for one last second, looking as if he wanted to hug her, but instead, he just nodded. He ran back to his sleek car, jumped in, and started the engine. With a smooth purr, he pulled out onto the highway and sped away into the darkness. His red taillights fading quickly around a bend, Alina stood alone in the rain again. She was cold, wet, and still stranded. But as she turned back to her silent car, she didn't feel quite as hopeless as before. She climbed back into the driver's seat, shivering, and closed the door. She hadn't solved her problems, but for a few minutes, she had helped someone else solve theirs. And in the middle of a terrible night, that was enough to keep her going. She wrapped her arms around herself and looked out the window, waiting for the next set of headlights to appear. The red lights of the luxury car had long disappeared around the sharp bend in the highway, leaving Alina in a silence that felt heavier than before. The rain was still coming down hard, drumming a relentless beat on the roof of the car. It was a cold, lonely sound. Alina sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the empty stretch of road where the man had vanished. She felt a small shiver run through her body. It wasn't just from the cold air seeping in through the window sill. It was the reality of her situation settling back in. The adrenaline of helping someone had faded, and now she was just a woman sitting in a dead car on the side of the road. She looked at the empty passenger seat, where the man had stood just moments ago. Her portable charger was gone. She had given it to him. It was a cheap thing, bought on clearance at a supermarket, but right now, it was the only connection to the outside world she had left. She had nothing. "Okay, Alina," she whispered to herself, trying to find that spark of bravery she had felt a few minutes ago. "You did a good thing. Now, you have to deal with the rest." She tried the ignition one last time, hoping against hope that the engine had just been cold or scared. She turned the key, and the engine made a groaning, wheezing noise before clicking into silence again. It was definitely dead. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone again. Still no signal. Just that frustrating X mark where the bars should be. She opened the door and stepped out into the downpour, holding her phone high above her head like a trophy. She walked a few steps away from the car, stumbling slightly on the gravel shoulder. She spun around slowly, praying to see even one tiny bar appear on the screen. Nothing. The wind picked up, whipping the rain sideways and stinging her face. Her hair was plastered to her forehead, and water was dripping down her neck, soaking into her uniform shirt. She got back into the car and slammed the door shut, sitting in the dark. The only light came from the occasional passing car, but none of them slowed down. They just zoomed past, splashing water onto her windshield. Their drivers oblivious to the woman stuck in the shadows. Minutes turned into what felt like hours. Elena's legs started to bounce nervously. She thought about her children. They were probably asleep at her neighbor's house, where she had dropped them off before her shift. She trusted her neighbor, Mrs. Gable, but she hated the thought of them waking up and asking where she was. She hated the thought of them worrying. She checked the time on her phone. It was past midnight. She should have been home an hour ago. Panic began to tighten in her chest again. If a police car didn't come by soon, she would have to walk. The thought of walking along this dark, wet highway in the pitch black terrified her. But staying here forever wasn't an option either. Suddenly, in the distance, she saw a faint blue light flickering through the trees. It wasn't the warm yellow of a street light or the bright white of another car's headlights. It was a strobe light, flashing. Blue and red dot. Alina felt a rush of relief so strong it made her dizzy. She turned on her hazard lights, even though the battery was weak, just to give the officer a signal. She watched the lights grow brighter, illuminating the rain in swirling patterns. A police cruiser pulled up slowly behind her, its spotlight cutting through the darkness and landing on her rear bumper. She watched the driver's door open. A tall officer stepped out. He put on his wide-brimmed hat to shield himself from the rain and approached her car slowly, shining a flashlight into the window. Alina rolled the window down all the way, even though the rain blew in. "Evening, ma'am," the officer said. His voice was deep and professional, but not unkind. "You having some trouble?" "Yes, officer," Alina said, her voice sounding small and tired. "My car died. The engine just stalled. I've been stuck here for a while." The officer shone his light around the interior of the car, taking in the cleaning supplies in the back seat and the tired look on her face. He looked back toward the highway, then at her license plate. "Do you have a way to call a tow truck?" he asked. "My radio is acting up due to the storm, and I'm pretty far out of range for the local dispatch on my personal phone." "I don't have any signal," Alina said, holding up her phone. "And I don't really have the money for a tow truck right now anyway," the officer sighed, a sound of genuine sympathy. He lowered his flashlight slightly. "It's not safe for you to stay here, ma'am. This road is slick, and cars are driving fast. If someone sideswipes you, it's going to be bad." "I know," Alina said. "I was just hoping." "Can't leave you here," the officer said firmly. "I have a chain in the trunk. I can pull your car to the next exit, about 5 miles up the road. There's a gas station there that's open 24 hours. You can wait for a tow truck there, where it's dry, and maybe you'll get a signal there." Lena's eyes widened. "You would do that?" It's against protocol to tow on the bumper like that usually. The officer admitted, but I'm not leaving a mother out here in this weather. Let's get you hooked up. The next 20 minutes were a blur of cold, wet activity. Alina had to get out and stand in the rain while the officer hooked the heavy chain to her car's frame. She was shivering violently by the time he was done, her teeth chattering. The officer noticed and told her to sit in the warm patrol car while he slowly towed her car. She sat in the passenger seat of the cruiser, surrounded by the smell of coffee and leather. It was warm and safe. She watched through the windshield as her little sedan was pulled along behind them like a reluctant pet. The 5 miles felt like the longest journey of her life. Every time the chain jerked, she winced, hoping her car wouldn't fall apart. Finally, they reached the exit ramp. In the distance, she could see the bright, welcoming neon lights of the gas station. The officer unhooked her car in the parking lot under the bright glow of the awning. "Should be good here," he said, wiping rain off his face. "They have a payphone inside if your cell still doesn't work." "Thank you," Elena said, reaching out to shake his hand. "Thank you so much. You saved me. Just doing my job, ma'am. Be safe now." He drove away, leaving her alone again, but this time in the light. Alina sat in her car for a moment, collecting herself. She took a deep breath and walked into the gas station. The bell above the door jingled. The clerk, a bored-looking young man, looked up from a magazine. She used the payphone mounted on the wall to call a local tow service she found in a phone book. It was an old thing to do, use a phone book, but it worked. An hour later, a burly man in a greasy truck arrived. He hooked up her car and told her the fee. Alina counted out her $12 and then looked at him, shamefaced. "I can pay the rest on Friday," she promised. "When I get paid, please, I need to get home." The tow truck driver looked at her, then at the rust bucket of a car. He saw the desperation in her eyes. He sighed and scratched his beard. "Look, I don't usually do this," he muttered, "but it's late, and you look like you've had a hell of a night. Just get me the money on Friday. Give me your number, and if you don't call, I'll find you." Lena promised him she would call. The drive to her apartment complex was quiet. She sat in the cab of the tow truck, watching the city streets pass by. When they finally pulled up to her building, the sky was starting to turn a lighter shade of gray. Dawn was coming. She paid the driver what she had and ran up the stairs to her apartment. She unlocked the door quietly, afraid of waking the neighbors. Inside, the apartment was still and dark. She tiptoed into the bedroom. There they were. Her 2 children, curled up together in the big bed, sound asleep. Alina stood in the doorway, dripping wet and exhausted. Her shoes were squelching with water. Her clothes were ruined. Her car was broken, and she was broke. But looking at them, sleeping peacefully, the tightness in her chest began to loosen. She was safe. They were safe. She went to the bathroom and peeled off her wet clothes, tossing them into the tub. She wrapped herself in a towel and sat on the edge of the tub for a long time, just staring at the wall. She thought about the man in the suit. She wondered if he made his flight. She wondered if he was sitting in a first-class seat right now. Drinking a cup of coffee, warm and dry, thinking about the strange woman who gave him her charger. She hoped he was okay. She hoped he didn't worry about her. She had survived worse nights than this. She was tough. People like her had to be tough. She crawled into bed next to her children, being careful not to wake them. As soon as her head hit the pillow, her body seemed to shut down. The exhaustion took over, pulling her into a deep, dreamless sleep. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, the sun was rising over the tarmac of a private airport. The sleek private jet sat on the runway, its engines idling. Inside the cabin, it was quiet and smelled of expensive leather and fresh coffee. The man in the suit, whose name was Richard, sat in a plush leather chair. He was staring out the window at the clouds below, but he wasn't really seeing them. He was seeing a dark, rainy highway. He was seeing a beat-up sedan with hazard lights blinking. He was seeing a woman's face, pale and tired, offering him a smile when she had nothing left to give. His assistant, a young woman named Jessica, walked over to him holding a tablet. "Mr. Sterling," she said softly, "the meeting is confirmed for 10 a.m. The shareholders are already gathering. We are on schedule, Richard nodded, but he didn't look at the tablet. Yes, Jessica. Thank you. Is everything all right, sir? Jessica asked, looking at him with concern. You seem distracted. You were frantically pacing before the car arrived to pick you up last night. Did something happen? Richard looked at his assistant. Usually, he was all business. Usually, he would bark out an order to check the numbers or pour him some water. But today, he felt different. He felt humbled. Jessica, Richard said slowly, I had a bit of a car trouble last night. My battery died. I was stuck in the rain. I thought I was going to miss this flight. I thought I was going to lose this contract for us. Jessica's eyes went wide. Oh my goodness. I didn't know. I would have sent another car immediately. Doesn't matter, Richard said, waving his hand. Someone stopped me, a woman. She was stranded too. Her car was broken down. She was wet, cold, and clearly had nothing. But she gave me her portable charger so I could make a call to arrange this ride. Jessica blinked, confused. She gave you her charger? While she was stuck? Yes, Richard said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small, pink plastic object. It looked so out of place in his manicured hand, and when I tried to pay her, she refused. She wouldn't take a dime. She just told me to help someone else. He looked at the cracked plastic of the charger. I have millions of dollars, Jessica. I have connections, lawyers, cars, and houses. But last night, on that dark road, none of that mattered. I was helpless. And this woman, who was nothing compared to me, she was the one who saved me. She gave me the only thing she had left, just because she wanted to help. Richard looked out the window again, his jaw set. I can't just forget about that. She is out there somewhere. She helped me close this deal before it even started. If I hadn't made that call, if I hadn't gotten on this plane, we would be bankrupt by next week. What do you want to do, sir? Jessica asked. Richard looked at the charger, then back at his assistant. We are going to find her, he said, his voice quiet but intense, and we are going to thank her properly. Not with money she doesn't want, but with something she actually needs. Alina woke up to the sound of her alarm clock beeping loudly, cutting through a dream she couldn't quite remember. For a second, she felt comfortable, wrapped in the warmth of her blankets. Then, the memories of the night before crashed down on her like the heavy rain she had driven through. The stalled car, the cold highway, the tow truck fee she couldn't afford. She opened her eyes and stared at the ceiling. The room was dim, the morning light struggling to get through the dusty blinds. She could hear the soft breathing of her 2 children in the bed next to her. For a moment, she just watched them sleep. They were the reason she did everything. They were the reason she got out of bed, even when her body screamed in protest and her bank account was empty. She slowly sat up, swinging her legs over the side of the bed. Every muscle in her body ached. Her back was stiff from sleeping in an awkward position, and her feet still felt swollen from the long shifts standing on concrete floors. She rubbed her face, trying to wake herself up. She felt a heaviness in her chest that had nothing to do with the lack of sleep. It was the weight of worry. She walked to the kitchen in her bare feet, the floorboards cold against her skin. She opened the fridge. It was mostly empty, save for a jug of water and a few condiments. The cupboards weren't much better. She found a half-empty box of cereal and poured the last dusty crumbs into 2 small bowls for the kids. There was no milk left, so she mixed it with a little water. It wasn't a great breakfast, but it was something. As the cereal softened in the bowls, Elena's mind raced. The car was sitting in the mechanic's lot waiting to be looked at. She had promised the tow truck driver she would pay him on Friday. Today was Wednesday. She had 2 days to come up with the money for the tow, plus whatever the mechanic was going to charge to fix the engine. She also had to pay the babysitter for the extra hours from the night before. She looked at the calendar on the wall. It was covered in crayon drawings her kids had made, but amongst the doodles, she saw the bills written in her own handwriting. Rent due, electric bill due, phone bill due. It felt like she was drowning, but instead of water, she was drowning in numbers. Read numbers. Minus signs. Asterisk. She woke the children up gently. They rubbed their eyes and ate the watery cereal without complaining. They were good kids. They didn't ask for much. They didn't know that their mother was terrified. To them, a bowl of cereal and a warm hug in the morning was enough. Alina kissed the tops of their heads and sent them off to get dressed, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill over. She had to be strong for them. After dropping them at school and the neighbor's house, Alina walked to work. The bus fare was $2, and she needed that $2 to buy a bottle of water later, so she walked. The sky was gray and overcast, matching her mood perfectly. The air was crisp, making her nose and cheeks red. She arrived at the office building where she worked the morning shift. It was a tall glass structure that housed all sorts of wealthy businesses. She entered through the side door, the one reserved for staff and maintenance. She put on her blue cleaning uniform and tied her hair back in a tight bun. For the next 6 hours, Alina worked like a machine. She vacuumed long carpets that cost more than her car. She scrubbed toilets that were made of Italian marble. She emptied trash cans filled with crumpled papers and half-empty expensive coffees. As she worked, she listened to the people in the building. She heard them talking about their weekends, their vacations, their stock portfolios, and their expensive dinners. She listened to a woman in the elevator complain that her brand new shoes were pinching her toes. Alina looked down at her own sneakers. The soles were peeling away from the fabric, and the tread was worn smooth. She had bought them used to years ago. The woman in the elevator was holding a cup of coffee that cost $5, more than Alina had in her pocket. Usually Alina would feel a pang of jealousy or anger when she heard these things. But today, she just felt numb. She was too tired to be angry. She just focused on the rhythm of her work. Spray, wipe, rinse. Spray, wipe, rinse. It was hypnotic. It kept her mind off the money problems for a little while. Around noon, Alina was taking a short break in the employee break room. She was sitting on a plastic chair, eating a plain sandwich she had brought from home. Her supervisor, a man named David, walked in. He was a decent man, but he was always stressed about budgets and deadlines. "Lena," David said, holding a clipboard. "I wanted to talk to you about your hours." Lena's heart skipped a beat. She swallowed her bite of sandwich quickly. "Is everything okay?" "Well, we're trying to cut back on overtime," David said, looking at his papers. "You've been picking up a lot of extra shifts lately. We might need to cut you back to strictly part-time for the next month or so. Just until the budget balances out." Alina felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. "Cut back?" she whispered. "But I need the overtime. I have rent to pay. My car just broke down." "I know," David said, looking sympathetic but helpless. "And you're one of my best workers. But my hands are tied. It comes from upper management. I'm sorry." Alina just nodded. She couldn't speak. If her throat wasn't so tight, she might have cried. She might have begged, but she knew it wouldn't do any good. David didn't make the rules. He just followed them. She stood up. Threw the rest of her sandwich in the trash. She had lost her appetite and went back to work. The rest of the day felt like she was moving through mud. Every movement took twice as much energy. Her eyes kept burning, but she refused to let the tears fall. She couldn't cry here. If she started crying, she wouldn't be able to stop. When her shift finally ended, the sun was beginning to set. Alina clocked out and walked outside. The air was getting colder again. The forecast said more rain was coming. She wrapped her thin jacket tighter around her body and started the long walk home. Her feet hurt so much that she had to limp slightly. Every step was a reminder of how hard her life was. She thought about the rich man from the night before. She wondered if he was somewhere warm right now. She wondered if his meeting went well. She hoped so. She hoped he was happy. She thought about her refusal to take his money. A part of her regretted it for a split second. If she had taken that cash, she could pay the tow truck driver. She could buy milk and bread. But then she shook her head. No, she did the right thing. Money wasn't everything. You had to be able to look at yourself in the mirror. She may be poor, but she had her dignity. She had done something good without expecting a reward. That meant something, didn't it? By the time she reached her apartment building, she was physically and emotionally drained. She climbed the stairs slowly, counting each step, just to keep her mind focused. 1, 2, 3. She unlocked her apartment door and stepped inside. The house was quiet. The kids were still at the neighbors, which gave her a moment of peace. She didn't turn on the lights. She didn't want to see the empty fridge or the stack of bills on the counter. She just walked to the small living room window and looked out at the street. She watched a car drive by. It was an ordinary car, just a regular sedan. Then she saw a truck, then a dog walking with its owner. Everyone was going somewhere. Everyone had a path. Alina felt stuck. She felt like she was standing still while the rest of the world moved forward. She sat down on the couch. Sinking into the cushions, she closed her eyes and let out a long sigh. Just get through tomorrow, she whispered to herself. And then the next day. Just keep going. Hundreds of miles away, in a different city, the sun was setting behind a wall of glass skyscrapers. Richard was sitting in a large plush conference room. The table was made of dark mahogany and polished to a shine. It was scattered with documents, laptops, and coffee cups. The meeting had gone well. Better than well. The deal was signed. The contracts were finalized. His company was safe. The panic from the night before was gone, replaced by the quiet confidence of a successful businessman. But Richard wasn't celebrating. The other men in the room were shaking hands, slapping each other on the back, and talking about going out for a steak dinner to celebrate. They were laughing. They were happy. Richard smiled politely, shook the hands he needed to shake, but his heart wasn't in it. "Richard, you coming?" one of his partners asked. "We're going to that new steakhouse downtown." "My treat." "No, I think I'm going to pass," Richard said, picking up his coat. "I have some things I need to do." "Come on, man. You saved the company today. We need to toast to you." Richard shook his head. "Another time? There's something else I have to handle." He left the room and walked to his private office. He closed the door, shutting out the noise of the celebration. He walked over to the window and looked out at the city lights below. The city was beautiful from up here, just a sea of twinkling lights. But he couldn't stop thinking about the darkness he had seen on the side of the highway. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the pink, cracked portable charger again. He had carried it with him all day. It had been on the conference table during the meeting. It was in his pocket during the lunch. It was absurd, really. He was a man who owned buildings, yet he was holding onto this piece of plastic like it was a diamond. His assistant, Jessica, knocked on the door and peeked in. "Mr. Sterling, is everything okay? Everyone is leaving." "Jessica, come in," Richard said. He turned away from the window. Jessica walked in, looking concerned. "You're not going to celebrate?" "I can't celebrate yet," Richard said. "I told you about that woman, the one who helped me." "Yes," Jessica said slowly, "the one you can't get out of your head." "It's not just that she helped me," Richard said, pacing around the room. "It's that she helped me without asking for anything. Do you know how rare that is in my world? Everyone wants something, Jessica. Everyone has an angle. They want a job, a contract, a favor, money. But she just wanted to help." He stopped pacing and looked at Jessica. She looked so tired. She had nothing. "And I just drove away. I feel terrible about it." "You tried to pay her," Jessica reminded him. "You tried to give her money?" "She refused," Richard said. "And I respected that. But I can't just let it go. I need to find her. I need to make sure she is okay. I kept the charger. There might be a way." Richard walked over to his desk and sat down. "I want you to make some calls. We need to find out if there were any incidents reported on that highway last night. Tow trucks, police calls, anything." Jessica looked at him, surprised. "You want to hunt her down?" "I want to thank her," Richard corrected her firmly. "And if she is in as much trouble as I think she is, I want to help. Not just give her money, but actually help her. She helped me when I was helpless. Now I have the power to help her. How can I not use it?" Jessica nodded, a small smile appearing on her face. "Okay, I'll make some calls. I'll check police logs and local towing companies in that area. It might take some time." "Take all the time you need," Richard said, putting the pink charger back into his pocket carefully. "I'm not going to forget about her." He looked back out the window at the city. Somewhere out there in the vast darkness of the world, a woman was struggling. And for the first time in a long time, Richard felt like he had a purpose that wasn't about making money. He had a debt to pay, not a financial one, but a human one. And he intended to pay it in full. Thursday morning arrived with a heavy gray sky that looked like it might snow at any moment. Alina woke up feeling even more exhausted than the day before, which she didn't think was possible. Her body felt like it had been put through a wringer. Her back was stiff, her feet were sore, and a headache was throbbing behind her eyes. But she couldn't stay in bed. The landlord had called the night before, politely reminding her that rent was due. He hadn't been mean about it, but the tension in his voice was clear. She had 3 days. 3 days to come up with the money she didn't have, or she and the children would have to find somewhere else to go. The thought of being homeless with 2 kids terrified her more than anything else. It was a nightmare that lived in the back of her mind constantly, whispering to her every time she bought a gallon of milk or paid a bill. She got the kids ready for school in a blur. They were running low on clean clothes. She had to improvise with mismatched socks and a sweater that was a little too small. They didn't seem to notice. They were just happy to have warm toast for breakfast, thanks to a neighbor who had lent her a loaf of bread. Alina dropped them off, then headed to her first job at a small diner in town. It wasn't the fancy office building. This place smelled like grease and old coffee, and the floors were sticky no matter how much she mopped them. But the manager was kind. They let her take home the leftover donuts at the end of the day. She worked the breakfast rush, scrubbing tables and washing dishes as fast as she could. Her hands were red and chapped from the hot water and the harsh soap. Every time she bent down to pick up a napkin or a dropped fork, her back screamed in protest. She felt dizzy a few times and had to lean against the counter to catch her breath. "Honey, you look pale," the cook said, peering through the service window. He was a big man with a gruff voice, but soft eyes. "Why don't you take a 5-minute break? Sit down and have some water." "I can't," Alina said, forcing a smile. "I have the lunch shift next. I need the hours." She pushed through the morning, telling herself she was strong. She was a survivor. But by the time her shift at the diner ended at 2 p.m., she felt like she was walking underwater. She still had one more shift to go. She had agreed to help clean a local dental office in the afternoon. It was only 3 hours, but it meant walking another 2 miles across town. She tightened the laces on her worn sneakers and started walking. The wind was biting, cutting right through her thin jacket. She kept her head down, watching her feet move one in front of the other. Left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. It was a mantra to keep her going. She arrived at the dental office and got to work immediately. She vacuumed the carpets, dusted the waiting room chairs, and sanitized the equipment. She was in the middle of mopping the hallway floor when she heard the front door open. Alina froze. The office was closed. No patients were supposed to be coming in. She thought maybe it was the dentist coming back to pick up something he forgot. She leaned her mop against the wall and wiped her hands on her apron. She walked out to the reception area to see who it was. "Excuse me, we're closed until tomorrow," she said, her voice tired. Then she stopped. Standing at the reception desk was not the dentist. It was her manager, David, and a police officer. A real police officer, not just a security guard. They both looked very serious. Alina's stomach dropped. She felt the blood drain from her face. She immediately thought of the tow truck driver. She had forgotten to call him back yesterday to confirm the payment. Did he call the police on her? Or maybe it was the landlord? Had he called the cops to evict her? She started to tremble. Did I do something wrong?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. David looked at the police officer, then back at Alina. He looked nervous. "Alina," he said gently, "there are some people here to see you. They're outside." Outside. Alina was confused. Why are they outside? Why didn't they come in? They didn't want to make a scene inside the building, David said. He looked like he didn't quite know what to do with himself. "There are 2 black cars parked out front. And, well, you should just go see." Alina felt like she was in a dream. A bad dream. She looked at the police officer. Am I under arrest? No, ma'am, the officer said. He looked kind. You're not in trouble. You just have visitors. Very insistent visitors. Alina took off her apron and hung it on the hook. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped her keys. She walked to the front door, her heart pounding in her chest like a drum. She felt sick. She didn't know what was happening, but she knew it couldn't be good. She didn't have any important visitors. Everyone she knew was just trying to survive like she was. She pushed the door open and stepped out onto the sidewalk. The cold air hit her face, but she didn't feel it. She froze in her tracks, parked right in front of the dental office, were two long black luxury cars. They were shiny and pristine, looking totally out of place on the gritty, cracked pavement of the street. The engines were purring softly. Standing next to the cars were two men in dark suits. They looked like bodyguards, and standing between them was the man from the highway. He was wearing a long wool coat and a scarf. He wasn't wet. He wasn't cold. He looked clean and rested, nothing like the frantic man she had met in the rain. Alina blinked. She couldn't believe her eyes. She rubbed her eyes with the back of her hand, thinking she was hallucinating from exhaustion. But when she looked again, he was still there. The man, Richard, saw her. His face lit up. He smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reached his eyes. He didn't wait for the bodyguards. He started walking toward her. Alina took a step back, instinctively putting her hands up as if to protect herself. What? What are you doing here? She stumbled. Richard stopped a few feet away from her. He didn't crowd her. He seemed to understand that she was scared. I told you I wouldn't forget, Richard said softly. You found me, she whispered. How did you find me? It wasn't easy, Richard admitted, but I had to try. I went back to the highway. I asked the police. I called every tow truck company in a 50-mile radius until I found the driver who picked you up. Alina looked at the ground, feeling embarrassed. She didn't want him to see her like this, in her dirty uniform with her cracked shoes and messy hair. I'm at work, she said. I can't talk right now, I know, Richard said. I spoke to your manager, David. He told me I could find you here. I hope I didn't get you in trouble. No, Alina said. I don't understand. Why'd you come all this way? Richard looked at her intensely. Because I made you a promise. I told you I would pay it forward. But I couldn't do that until I found you. I didn't want your money, Alina said, her voice trembling. She remembered the debt, the rent, the fear. It was all swirling around in her head. I told you that. I know, Richard said, and I respected that yesterday. But then I got on that plane, and I went to my meeting, and I closed the deal. And all I could think about was you standing in the rain. He took a small step closer. I realized something, Alina. You saved me. Not just because of the charger, because of your kindness. You showed me more humanity in 5 minutes than most people show me in 5 years. You helped me when you had nothing. I have everything, and I almost didn't stop to help you. That ashamed me. Alina looked up at him. She saw tears in his eyes. This wasn't just a rich guy feeling guilty. This was a man who had been truly moved. I have to pay you back, Richard said. Not because I want to buy you off, but because it's the right thing to do. Please, let me do this. He reached into his coat pocket. Alina flinched, thinking he was pulling out a checkbook. But instead, he pulled out the pink, cracked portable charger she had given him. It looked so small in his hand. Forgot this, he said, placing it gently in her hand. It saved my business. I called my assistant on this charger. I arranged the ride. I made the meeting. Alina held the plastic object. It was warm from his pocket. I don't know what to say. Say you'll let me help you, Richard said. I'm not asking you to take charity. I'm asking you to accept a reward for a good deed. He nodded to one of the men in suits, who handed him a thick, white envelope. Richard held it out to Alina. Alina looked at the envelope. It was thick. Very thick. She knew what was inside. She knew it could be the answer to all her prayers. It could pay the rent. It could fix the car. It could buy food. But she felt a stubborn resistance inside her. It felt too easy. It felt like magic, and magic wasn't real. Life was hard work. Can't just take that, she said, pushing his hand away gently. I didn't help you for a reward. And that is exactly why you deserve it, Richard insisted, pushing the envelope back toward her. Please, Elena, don't let your pride stand in the way of your family. I did some research. I know you're struggling. There is no shame in struggling, but there is no need to drown when someone is throwing you a life raft. He reached into his other pocket and pulled out a set of keys. They were car keys, brand new ones. They had a logo on them she didn't recognize. And this, Richard said, placing the keys on top of the envelope, is for a reliable vehicle. It's waiting at the dealership down the street. 4 doors. Safe. Heated seats. It's yours, Lena gasped. She looked at the keys, then at the envelope, then at the man. She couldn't breathe. The world was spinning. A car? A new car? A new car, Richard nodded. Your old car is done. I know it. You know it. You shouldn't be walking 5 miles in the snow to clean floors. Tears finally spilled over Elena's cheeks. They were hot and fast. She couldn't stop them. She looked at David, who was standing in the doorway of the dental office, watching with his mouth open. She looked at the police officer, who was smiling. She looked back at Richard. This is too much, she sobbed. It's too much. It's just a start, Richard said softly. You have a big heart, Elena. You deserve a break. Please, take it. For your kids. When he mentioned her kids, something inside Elena broke. The wall of stubbornness came crashing down. She thought of their empty bellies. She thought of the eviction notice. She thought of the cold walk to the grocery store. She reached out and took the envelope and the keys. Her hands were shaking so much she almost dropped them. Thank you, she whispered, her voice choked with tears. Thank you so much, Richard smiled. He looked lighter, as if a heavy weight had been lifted off his shoulders too. No, he said. Thank you. Didn't ask for a hug. He didn't ask for a picture. He just nodded to his bodyguards, turned around and walked back to his car. He paused at the door, looked back at her one last time, and gave a small wave. Then he got into the car and the 2 black cars drove away, leaving Elena standing on the sidewalk with a plastic charger in one hand and a new life in the other. She stood there for a long time, unable to move. She didn't know if she was dreaming or if she had fainted in the dental office. She pinched her arm. It hurt. It was real. She looked at the white envelope in her hand. She didn't open it yet. She just held it tight against her chest, like a shield. For the first time in a very long time, the sun seemed to peek through the gray clouds, shining down on just her. The silence that followed the departure of the black cars was heavy. But it wasn't the same suffocating silence Elena had felt on the highway. This silence was filled with a buzzing kind of energy, like the air right after a lightning strike. She stood there on the cracked sidewalk, shivering slightly in the cold wind, clutching the thick white envelope and the set of heavy car keys. They felt cold and metallic in her palm. To anyone walking by, she looked like a cleaning worker taking a break, maybe holding her lunch or a cleaning schedule. But in her hands, she was holding the weight of her entire future. She looked down at the envelope. It was sealed, professional, and expensive. Her heart was hammering against her ribs so hard it hurt. With trembling fingers, she flipped it over and broke the seal. She pulled out a stack of papers. It wasn't just money. It was a cashier's check, printed on heavy paper with elegant font. She read the numbers once, then blinked, and read them again. The amount had too many zeros to be real. It was enough to pay off the mortgage on her small apartment completely. It was enough to cover the rent for years, if she chose to move. It was enough to put her children through college without them ever having to worry about student loans. But there was more. Tucked behind the check was a handwritten note on a piece of crisp stationery. The handwriting was neat and precise. Elena, thank you for the lesson on humanity. Use this to build a life where you never have to worry about being stranded again. I have also paid off your towing bill and arranged for your old car to be scrapped so you don't have to deal with it. The new car is fully registered and insured in your name. The keys are in the ignition at the dealership, just a block away. Richard, Elena, stared at the note. She read the words fully registered and insured. She read paid off your towing bill. A small, hysterical laugh escaped her throat, turning quickly into a sob. She pressed the paper to her chest, right over her heart. It was surreal. It felt like the ending of a movie she had watched on TV, not her own messy, difficult life. David, her manager, was still standing in the doorway of the dental office. His mouth was slightly open, his glasses pushed up on his nose. He had seen the cars, he had seen the well-dressed man, and he had seen Alina holding the envelope. Alina, David said cautiously, stepping out onto the sidewalk. Is everything okay? Who was that? Alina looked up at him, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her uniform. She took a deep, shuddering breath. She didn't have to explain everything. She didn't have to tell him about the rain or the highway or the pink Charger. She just smiled. It was the first genuine full smile she had worn in months. Everything is okay, David, she said, her voice steadier than she expected. Actually, everything is going to be better than okay. Did you win the lottery? David asked, still in shock. Something like that, Alina said softly. I just met a man who keeps his promises. She looked at her watch. Her shift at the dental office was over. She didn't have to clean the restrooms tonight. She didn't have to scrub the floors. She was free. I have to go, she said to David. The floor? You haven't finished mopping, David stammered. I'm sorry, Alina said, not feeling sorry at all. I quit. She didn't say it meanly. She said it like she was stating a fact. She was done mopping floors for minimum wage. She was done scraping by. She handed him her uniform apron, folded neatly. She handed him her cleaning keys. And then, with nothing but the clothes on her back and the keys in her hand, she walked away. She walked down the street, her stride getting faster with every step. The dealership was just 1 block over, exactly as the note said. As she walked, she called the neighbor who was watching her kids. Hi, Mrs. Gable, Alina said, her voice trembling with excitement. Can you keep the kids for another hour? I have a surprise. I'm coming to pick them up, but we're going to drive home in a new car. A new car? Mrs. Gable asked, confused. Alina, are you okay? I'm better than okay, Alina said. I'll see you soon. She hung up and turned the corner. There, under the bright lights of a large dealership lot, sat a brand new SUV. It wasn't flashy or red like a sports car. It was a deep, safe blue color. It looked sturdy and warm. She walked up to it and saw the paperwork taped to the inside of the window. It had her name on it. She used the keys Richard had given her. She pressed the button, and the lights flashed. She opened the door. The smell of new leather wafted out to meet her. It was the cleanest, nicest smell she had ever encountered. She climbed into the driver's seat and sank into the soft cushions. She sat there for a moment, just running her hands over the steering wheel. It was heated. She turned the ignition, and the engine purred to life, a smooth, quiet sound that was nothing like the rattling cough of her old sedan. She drove off the lot, heading toward Mrs. Gable's house. Her eyes were filled with tears again, blurring her vision, but she didn't care. She turned on the heater, letting the warm air wash over her. She turned on the radio, and soft music filled the car. It was a moment of pure peace. When she pulled up to Mrs. Gable's house, her neighbor and her 2 children were waiting on the porch. They saw the shiny blue car and looked around, confused. Alina stepped out and waved. Mom? Her son asked, running down the steps. Is that for us? Yes, baby, Alina said, kneeling down to hug him tight, then hugging her daughter. This is for us. We aren't taking the bus anymore. That night, for the first time in forever, Alina didn't count her pennies before she bought dinner. She drove her children to a real restaurant. They ordered pizza, pasta, and soda. She watched them eat, their faces covered in sauce. Laughing and talking about the heated seats in the car. She didn't tell them about the money yet. She didn't want to overwhelm them. She just let them enjoy the pizza. But inside, she felt a sense of calm that had been missing for years. The constant, low-level hum of anxiety in the back of her brain was finally quiet. She wasn't worrying about the landlord. She wasn't worrying about the tow truck. She was just a mom having dinner with her kids. A few days later, Lena went back to the highway. It was a sunny afternoon, a stark contrast to the rainy night that had changed everything. She drove her new blue car to the exact spot where she had broken down. She pulled onto the shoulder and put the car in park. She sat there for a long time, looking at the asphalt. She remembered the fear she felt. She remembered the cold. She remembered the feeling of hopelessness. But mostly, she remembered the headlights of Richard's car cutting through the dark. She got out of the car, stood on the side of the road. A few cars zoomed past, but she didn't care. She took the small, pink, cracked portable charger out of her pocket. She hadn't thrown it away. She kept it. "Thank you," she whispered to the empty road. She knew she would probably never see Richard again. He was a millionaire with a company to run, and she was a regular woman with a second chance. But their lives had touched, and that touch had changed both of them as she stood there. She saw another car ahead of her. It was an old pickup truck, pulled over with steam rising from the hood. A man was standing next to it, looking under the hood with an expression of pure frustration on his face. He was kicking the tires. Alina watched him for a moment. She saw his shoulders slump in defeat. She knew that feeling. She knew exactly how heavy that feeling was. She didn't hesitate. She walked back to her car, popped the trunk, and grabbed a brand new roadside emergency kit she had bought that morning. It had jumper cables, a flashlight, and a first aid kit. She walked over to the man in the pickup truck. "Excuse me," she said. "Do you need some help?" The man looked up, startled. He looked at her, then at her nice car, and then at the emergency kit in her hands. He seemed surprised that a woman driving a new car would stop to help him. "I think my radiator blew," the man said. "I'm waiting for my brother, but he's an hour away." "I can't fix a radiator," Alina smiled, "but I can wait with you. And I have a flashlight if you need to look at the engine again. And I have a bottle of water if you're thirsty." The man looked at her and his shoulders dropped. The tension left his face. That would be really nice," he said. "Thank you." Alina stood there on the side of the highway, under the bright sun, with the stranger. They talked about the weather, about cars, and about how unreliable they could be. She didn't tell him about the millionaire. She didn't tell him about the reward. She was just there, being a human being, helping someone who needed it. She realized then that Richard was right. The money had changed her life, but the act of kindness was what truly saved her. By helping Richard, she had reminded herself that she wasn't powerless. And by helping this stranger, she was keeping the promise she had made in the rain. The reward hadn't just been the money or the car. The reward was knowing that no matter how dark the night is, or how heavy the rain falls, there is always a light. And sometimes, you have to be the one to hold it up for someone else. When the man's brother finally arrived, Lena waved goodbye and got back into her car. She felt light as a feather as she merged back onto the highway, driving toward a future that was finally undeniably bright.